So hello everyone and welcome to NFRW on the Issues. This is exclusive to you, our NFRW members. I'm Ann Shockett, President of the NFRW, the National Federation of Republican Women. And today's show is going to be very important and educational. It's going to be a presentation about the timely issues affecting our lives. You and I are members of the largest Republican women's grassroots organization in the entire country. We're involved in all political concerns at all levels, from the local to the state to the national. All issues that affect our nation affect us. And because of that, since 1938, NFRW has been on the forefront, building leaders, energizing communities, and keeping America strong. We are truly privileged to have a special guest who is a federated sister, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik from my home state of New York. But before I formally introduce the Congresswoman, I'd like to recognize New York State Federation President Kim Bowers, and I'd like to thank New York State immediate past president and our Caring for America chair, Karen Smith, for assisting in this show. Congresswoman Stefanik represents New York's 21st CD, and she's serving a third term. Hers is an inspirational story of her many exceptional accomplishments, including being the first in her immediate family to graduate college, becoming the youngest Republican woman at age 30 to be elected to Congress, and creating a leadership PAC dedicated to recruiting Republican women to run for office. When President Trump tweeted a video of Congresswoman Stefanik questioning former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, he stated that, quote, "A new Republican star is born," unquote, and I know we agree. Congresswoman Stefanik serves on the Armed Services Committee, the Committee on Education and Labor, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. We would need much more time than we have now to enumerate all her initiatives, but a couple that we'll mention include authoring the Be Open Act, the largest fix to Obamacare of the 114th Congress, and the Flexible Pell Grant for 21st Century Students Act, and there's so much more. Congresswoman Stefanik grew up in her family's small business, so she understands the values of hard work and fiscal responsibility. After graduating with honors from Harvard, the Congresswoman served in the West Wing in the administration of President George W. Bush. After that, she served in distinguished capacities, including Director of Vice Presidential Debate Prep for Republican Vice Presidential nominee Paul Ryan, and Director of Communications for the Foreign Policy Initiative. Without further ado, it is my honor to welcome Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Congresswoman?
Thank you so much, Ann, and I'm so honored to participate in this wonderful forum. I also want to thank Kim Bowers from New York State, as well as Karen Smith, who is a constituent of mine from Fulton County. I also saw that we have Kim as well from Fulton County, not Kim, someone else. I
believe Barbara Ellman might be here.
Barbara is on there, and a few others that I saw in the chat. Kelly from my district. So hi, Kelly. Hi, Karen. Hi, Kim. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity. I'm speaking to you from Saratoga County. So I am working in my district, New York's 21st Congressional District. And I thought today I would talk a little bit about my background, what I'm focused on in Congress, and really what's at stake in this election. So my district is a district that I flipped from Democrat to Republican. In 2014, when I first ran for Congress, I was 29 years old when I started the process, and very few people thought I could win. But with the support of our hardworking grassroots leaders across the district, people stood up and felt that it was a time for a new generation of leadership standing strong for our conservative principles as the Republican nominee. And we flipped this district from Democrat to Republican. And I've been honored to be reelected by double-digit margins ever since then. This used to be a swing district, but I worked very, very hard to deliver results. Since I've been elected to Congress, as Ann mentioned, I serve on the House Armed Services Committee. I represent Fort Drum, which is home to the 10th Mountain Division, the most deployed unit in the U.S. Army, a very historic division. We have troops who are currently deployed today, in fact, and most of the time there are troops deployed around the world. So I've really focused on working with President Trump on rebuilding our nation's military. As we remember, during the Obama-Biden administration, there were significant, devastating cuts to our military budget. So we've worked very hard to rebuild that military readiness training to ensure that our men and women in uniform have the resources they deserve. I also represent the highest number of veterans out of any district in New York State. And I've been very focused on making sure that our veterans get access to the best possible care that they've earned and make sure they get access to their VA benefits. I spend a lot of time working with my office to ensure that we close out VA cases. I've been able to close out over $3 million of individual VA benefits or VA benefits to surviving spouses of our North Country heroes. In addition, I serve on the Committee on Education and Labor, and have been very focused on making sure that we have strong K-12 education led at the local level. Unfortunately, New York State is one of the leading states that have implemented Common Core, which has really been a disaster in terms of the federal overreach when it comes to our education policy. And my third committee, which many of you probably watched, is the House Intelligence Committee, where I've been very focused on standing up for the Constitution, the American people, and the truth. I'm sure many of you tuned into the impeachment hearings, but the impeachment hearings were actually the second chapter of this process. This process started with closed door depositions that the American people were not able to see in the bunker of the Capitol. Adam Schiff very much politicized that process and then strategically leaked misinformation. And it really was an example of the attack of the Democrats, the establishment on the American people and the American voters who elected President Trump to serve as our president, the duly elected president. So I stood up for the truth, and the way I tried to approach those questions of the witnesses is really just reading their depositions that were given in that closed door bunker, because it was the first opportunity for the American people to hear from them. Not a single witness in their depositions had a shred of evidence of impeachable offenses. So clearly, I think Republicans did a strong job standing up for the Constitution and the truth. And most importantly, we are also working as we head into 2020 to stand up for what's at stake in this country. You can't help but watch the news and be concerned, whether it's tearing down of statues. Even in upstate New York, they tore down a statue of Frederick Douglass. The attacks on our law enforcement. In New York City, the retirement rates of the NYPD is 400% higher because of the violent attacks on our law enforcement. People need to stand up for our principles. That's what's at stake this election cycle. And the Democratic Party is not our grandfather's Democratic Party. It is the party of the far left. It is the party of the socialist Democrats. So it's going to be important for us to talk about our record of results. Every time I run for re-election in this district, I always outwork my opponent, but I very much focus on the results that I have delivered to this community, whether it's work to ensure that we have the resources during the COVID crisis, whether it's my work for veterans, for students, or for hardworking families and small businesses in our region. On the COVID piece, which is really important, New York prior was the epicenter, and still in terms of our numbers, we were more impacted than any other state across the country. The president and this administration worked very, very well with states all across this country, doubling the resources in New York's case for our testing capacity, making sure that we have adequate PPE, making sure that the federal government would support our need when it comes to ventilators. But one of the key issues that has been, frankly, a tragedy in New York is our governor did not follow federal guidance when it came to nursing homes. And we've lost thousands and thousands of loved ones because of that failure of Governor Cuomo, who put positive COVID patients into the nursing homes, not following the CMS guidance. So Republicans at the federal level and at the state level, and actually bipartisan members at the state level, want an independent investigation into that failed leadership. So there's obviously a number of issues at stake this election cycle. Your engagement is so critical, especially, everywhere across the country, but especially in those key states that are going to be very, very important for the presidential. And as I see many of your comments, you are from those key states, making sure that every voter turns out, because every vote is going to matter. In terms of my district, we are working very hard. The Democrats are throwing everything they have at me. My opponent, who I ran against last time and beat, she is the toast of Hollywood. Every Hollywood D-lister, Rosie O'Donnell, Chelsea Handler, has smeared me online and is donating to my opponent. But I've been proud to earn the support of voters in my district, but also Americans across the country who are standing up for our principles and to make sure that we protect and defend the American dream. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know that Republican women are the most important grassroots organizers in our party, and I've learned that from my district. We have amazing Republican women, both elected and some of our county and town leaders. So I'm just so grateful for all of your support. And I'll turn it back to you, Ann.
Okay. Well, thank you. Congresswoman, on behalf of all our NFRW members, thank you so much for your vital efforts to support our nation. You really are an inspiration to Republican women everywhere. I'm especially proud to have you representing New York State. Now it's time for the Q&A, and I know our members really enjoy this part, and they've sent us interesting questions. Political Director Terry Hauser will be joining me during this Q&A session. The first question comes from Heidi Johnson of Virginia. She writes, my children have all been considered essential employees, and they've been working the entire time during this COVID-19 crisis. While they benefited from the stimulus checks they received, they're not receiving any more. Is Congress considering another stimulus, number 4?
It's a great question, and it's very timely. We are considering an additional stimulus check to particularly focus on those who are in the middle class, to make sure that they get the economic relief that they need at this very difficult time. That's something that the president and his administration have talked about, and that's something that I would be supportive of. I anticipate we are likely to have that additional COVID package sometime this month. And again, we want to make sure that Americans who are working hard every day, who are rising to this occasion, have the economic security they need for their families, but also to reinvest in their communities and keep our economy going. So I'm optimistic that we will have that COVID relief package this month.
That's good news. I want to ask the people who have joined us, the members who have joined us, to please feel free to join the chat. Ask any questions that you would like to ask. We did receive a number of questions, but if we do have time, we will look at the chat and see what you have asked. Colleen Wilson of Arizona writes, after 28 years in Minneapolis, I moved back to my home state of Arizona. I was deeply saddened by the riots and violence fueled by BLM and Antifa that destroyed my former hometown and other cities across the country. Until recent events, I thought, along with many other people, that BLM was a mostly harmless, grassroots organization with a small following. It is not. BLM is well-funded, well-run, and very dangerous. What are you and other conservatives doing to expose them? How will you stop them from silencing conservatives, stripping us of our rights and safety, and stealing this election?
Thank you for the question. So I think every American's heart breaks when we saw the tragedy of George Floyd. And I think we can look to leaders like Tim Scott, who have been really important voices to ensure that we have strong justice reform, but we also have the rule of law, and we're not destroying private property, and we're supporting our law enforcement. What's concerning to me about many of the groups and voices, particularly as we look at Minneapolis, whether it's Ilhan Omar or some of the local city elected officials in Minneapolis, they're advocating for defunding our police. That is not a popular position. Americans do not want to defund our police. When any family is in a situation where they are at risk, or if there is some type of violence or their private property is imposed upon, who do you call? You call 911, and the expectation is that our law enforcement responds and that it's equal justice under the law. So I'm deeply concerned about the destruction in Minneapolis. I'm deeply concerned about how far to the left the policy priorities of the Democratic Party have become when it comes to defunding our police. You're seeing that play out in New York City. You're seeing voices like AOC who are saying, when she says defund the police, she means defund, further to the left than Mayor Bill de Blasio, who has totally turned his back on our law enforcement. And the communities that hurts the most are the communities that are the most at risk, who need to have that positive relationship with their local law enforcement. What are we doing in the North Country? What we do in my district is our law enforcement has very strong relationships with the community, with folks from all types of backgrounds. And I think that's a positive example to set. We had a great Back the Blue rally and parade this weekend with hundreds of people who turned out to show support for our law enforcement, which is what my community believes in.
Thank you. This question was posed by several of our members. Can you tell us who you feel are the top women challenger candidates for this election cycle?
I am so glad you asked that. I forgot to mention in my opening statement, although Ann touched that, I am very focused on recruiting and electing Republican women. Number in the House, and although there's a historic number of women serving in Congress, we need to make sure that we are supporting strong Republican women candidates who are also the best candidates to represent their districts. I would say the strongest challengers, we have them all across the country. I'll start in Iowa. One of our top districts is held by a freshman Democrat, Abby Finkenauer. We have a tremendous challenger there, Ashley Hinson, who is the nominee. She overwhelmingly won her primary. She's a state senator as well as a former news anchor, is very focused on issues of the district and will work effectively with President Trump. We have tremendous candidates in New York State. There are a number of candidates of seats we can flip. We also have former Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, who is looking to win back a seat that Republicans should win this year. In addition, we have some amazing candidates in California in those those must-win seats in that we lost last cycle that we can win back. Young Kim, who won on Election Day in 2018, but ended up losing as they did the ballot harvesting and recounted. She would be the first Korean-American woman ever elected to Congress. Going down to Texas, we have Genevieve Collins, who's an entrepreneur. She's a great Texan woman and is running a strong race against Colin Allred. In New Mexico, we have Yvette Harrell, who is running in a very Republican seat that we need to win back. What is exciting about this cycle is over 200 Republican women raised their hands to run for office, more than ever before, and a huge number are getting through their primaries. So I'm very, very excited about our strong women who will be on the ballot. And there's been some great national news articles about it recently.
This is very exciting. Now, this question also came from several of our members. What are your thoughts on students returning soon to school?
I support students safely returning to school. We need to make sure that our schools have the resources that are needed. We need to make sure that our teachers have the resources that are needed. And here's why. I've talked to many students, many teachers, and many parents about the challenges they've worked through as kids have been forced to learn at home. In my district, and I'm sure this is similar to different parts of the country, rural internet coverage is a challenge. So you have some students who are woefully underserved with only online education. I think there is creative solutions that we can update our operations at school to make sure that there's proper precautions taken. But I think our kids need to be at school. And my other concern is if you look at the students who are most negatively impacted by the stay-at-home requirements for education at home, the ones that don't have parents who are focused or a caregiver that's focused on ensuring they complete the curriculum have really become lost and fallen off the radar. I've talked to teachers and superintendents where there's a percentage of students that they have not had contact with despite reaching out many, many times. So we want to make sure that our students who are most underserved get the education they need, which means safely going back to school this fall.
Excellent analysis. Political Director Terry Hauser, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask from the chat?
We have a couple of members who are interested in your work on the Intelligence Committee, and specifically Misty Hindman from Arkansas and Helena Pitcock are asking, will we see any consequences for those who were in charge of the Mueller probe? We know we have a small window of time before the election results could change everything in the way of justice. And Helena says that her congressman and good friend, who's like a second son, is the Republican leader of the House Oversight and Intelligence Committee, Congressman James Comer. She wants to know whether your committee will be investigating the Democratic leadership who have lied and falsified so many things in the Trump witch hunt.
Absolutely, there should be accountability, and I'm deeply concerned that there is not accountability at the highest levels. You know, one of the key questions, and this was before the impeachment proceedings happened, but one of Jim Comey's first testimony was a question that I asked him about why he did not follow proper protocol to notify Congress, which was required of opening of a counterintelligence investigation. And his response was that it was too serious. And that's an unacceptable response. So essentially, he did not follow the protocols outlined by Congress. So there needs to be consequences. And I know that John Durham, who is appointed by Attorney General Bill Barr, is pursuing every bit of evidence, is leaving no stone unturned. It is important that this gets done so that the American people can have an answer to this. I also think the more information that is coming out in terms of some of the notes of the meeting with President Obama and Vice President Biden, with Peter Strzok and others, that evidence should never have been withheld from Congress. And it shows a fundamental abuse of power and a politicization and a political targeting of a candidate for president. And I know the questioner also asked about Jamie Comer. I'm a big fan of Jamie Comer. We're really looking forward to him being the Republican voice on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee to ensure that we have accountability.
The next question comes from Rosemary Sarah of North Carolina. We know that women tend to be more reluctant than men to run for office. How do we overcome this natural reluctance to get even more women to take the plunge?
Well, I think times are changing, even in the past couple of years. I used to find that women, we would have to encourage them to run for office, and they would need to be asked a few times. But I think as we're seeing more role models out there, there are lots of women who are stepping up and raising their hand. They've been amazing candidates who have the confidence and they have the background, and they're able to look at other role models who are non-traditional candidates and how successful they are. One conversation that I think is interesting that I have with women candidates that is sometimes not the first question of male candidates is they often ask, how do you balance, for example, if you're running for Congress and you have young children, how do you balance that? You know, my husband and I got married 3 years ago this August. We do not have children yet, but there are examples of Republican women who have had children while in office. Kathy McMorris Rogers from Washington State, Jamie Herrera Butler, Martha Roby from Alabama has young children. And it's helpful to put those women candidates in touch with those currently serving to answer some of those questions about how they make it work. I tend to find also women are the hardest working candidates. If you ask any woman on this call, we're all juggling a lot of things, making sure that the household's running, making sure that our family's okay, making sure that our professional duties are met. So women are exceptional candidates because they work hard and they're very good at all that juggling to make sure they're addressing all of the concerns of voters.
Absolutely. Terry, any other questions?
I have a good follow-up from that from Virginia Dry, who is a young Republican running for state rep in New Hampshire. She's hoping you to overturn a long-term Democratic district and wants to know if you have any advice for her.
Well, we need strong Republicans running in every district across the country. And first of all, thank you for running. It's incredibly important to make sure that we have strong candidates across the board at the most local level, all the way up to these federal races. I think making sure that you're talking to voters and really focusing on your district and the issues that matter to your voters. Nothing is more important than hearing directly from your future constituents about what their concerns are. I also think that there are lots of online tools that are useful for candidates that maybe are not the front runners, but are the underdogs, which I was an underdog when I first ran for office. So I would suggest using those online tools, although that is getting a little bit challenging as we're seeing some of the suppression of conservative voices online on some of these platforms. But you can still connect with your, I think, supporters and making sure that you're building a coalition. I would also say make sure you have a strong data program. And by that, I mean knowing who your vote targets are, building an email list, making sure that you're building a donor list, the nuts and bolts of a strong campaign, just like any strong grassroots organization would have. But thank you again for running.
This next one is from Deborah Mayer of New York. You are in charge of debate prep for vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan. If you were doing debate prep for President Trump, what would be your advice?
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the debates with President Trump and Joe Biden. The Joe Biden of today, in terms of his answering of questions, is very different than the Joe Biden of the 2012 election cycle. Clearly, the Biden campaign strategy is to keep him in his basement. Every time he does a press interview or every time he does a somewhat quasi-public event or answers a question, he really struggles and has made many, many missteps. And you're even hearing from the Biden campaign that they are trying to avoid these types of campaign settings. So I really think President Trump is a strong debater. He did a great job in the 2016 election cycle debating Secretary Clinton. And there's a real contrast to draw there. President Trump has the energy and the record of results. Joe Biden has struggled to keep up and to clearly articulate what his message is. We know what he stands for, and he stands for the failed Obama-Biden record of government takeover of healthcare, infringing on constitutional rights, and that he's going far to the left, allowing people like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib to really hijack the Democratic Party. So I'm looking forward to the debates. President Trump is a non-traditional president. He's a non-traditional campaigner, and I'm sure his debate prep is also non-traditional. So it will be very different, but Joe Biden is a very, very different candidate than he was when he ran for vice president in 2012.
So true. Terry?
Lorraine, we have a couple of people who have been waiting to ask questions with their hands up. So Lorraine Woodwork, I'm going to unmute you and you can ask your question. Lorraine, are you there? All right, let's go to Lynn Blankenbecker.
Lorraine is not unmuted. Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, is she going or can I go?
Go ahead and go, Lynn.
Oh, okay, thank you, Representative. I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your words of wisdom with us. You and I have spoken. As you know, I'm running for Congress in New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District. And thank you for supporting our veterans, being a veteran myself, and having recently served aboard the USNS Comfort when I suspended my campaign to take care of the folks in New York City. I really appreciate your efforts. My question to you is, what advice do you have for a woman running in Congress this election cycle in 2020, especially when we are getting the question about what do you think about President Trump? And I should preface that with, I served on President Trump's Women's Advisory Board, so I think he's doing a great job. But how do you answer that question?
I answer the question that I voted for President Trump in 2016, and I'm running on the ticket with President Trump proudly. I'm one of the co-chairs of his New York re-election campaign and am a leading surrogate for him. So I really talk about his record of results. I talk about the issues and the different positions, but I am, strongly supportive. And interestingly, women certainly in my district voted for President Trump. And I know in New Hampshire, he continues to have significant grassroots. So in your district, Lynn, it's a net gain to be working and earning the support of those Trump voters.
Thank you very much.
Terry, is anybody else who would like to ask a question live?
Yes, Elizabeth Gerard, if you can unmute yourself, or you're unmuted, please ask your question.
And by the way, Elizabeth is president of her state federation.
Thank you so much, Anne. Well, thank you so much, Representative, for this. You are a huge, I'm a young Republican woman myself, so you're a huge inspiration. In New Hampshire, we have over 100 women running for both state and office, so many of whom who are on this call. I think that you do a fantastic job of engaging with your voters, and I think that one of the biggest issues that young Republicans face is engaging with more young people. So as a YR woman yourself, what do you think is the best way to get our message out to specifically young Republican and female voters at the grassroots level?
It's something that we need to work on as a party. It's something that we need to work on at the most local level. I do it in a couple different ways. So my campaign volunteers, we have volunteers who are seniors, but we also have a lot of volunteers who are high school students and college students, and really encourage that type of work internship opportunities so they can learn at the most grassroots level in a positive environment. I also think getting out there in the community is important. I go to schools when, before COVID, I would frequently go and do school tours, talk to kids from elementary, middle school to high school. I think that's important as well. I think serving as a role model is also, it's certainly something that I take seriously, and it's very humbling to me that parents sometimes will bring their daughters to local events and, show their young daughters what they can achieve, whether it's in Congress or any industry. Using online tools is important as well. We know that's where our young people are, although I do not use TikTok because I'm very concerned about the security.
I don't either.
Yeah, but that's where a lot of young people are. It's a big security issue. It's a big national security issue that we need to raise awareness on and really make sure that there's accountability there. But young people are on Instagram. I post positive images on Instagram. And I think the Republican Party in general, whether it's reaching out to young people, reaching out to minorities, reaching out to women, we need to go where those voters are to make sure that they're hearing our message and our principles, which resonate across every demographic, across every, whether you're a man or woman, no matter what your background is, our principles resonate for everyone.
Thank you.
I think we should continue on this streak, Terry. Do we have any other live questions?
Yes, our next question will be Pam McAloon. I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, but Pam, I will unmute you and please ask your question.
Congressman or Congresswoman Stefanik, I'm sorry, how do you pronounce your name, Stefanik? Yes, I'm kind of new to this federation. We have Pinellas Federated Republican Women, and I want to thank you for all you do. I have a couple of questions, but my major questions focuses upon, we're talking about accountability, what's happening with the Durham investigation. And I think a lot of people, pretty much feel, frustrated with lack of results with accountability. So maybe you've already have answered this question, but anyway, that's my major question going forward.
Sure. I think making sure that there's accountability and getting to the bottom of it and ensuring that the Durham findings are presented to the American people is going to be really important to have that before the election. I think the American people deserve that answer, particularly after the gross abuse of power and the corrupt leadership we've seen by Adam Schiff and the Democrats really focusing on targeting this president since the day he was elected, before he even was sworn into office. So I think getting that out there and that accountability is going to be incredibly important.
Thank you. Do you think there will be a convention, RNC convention, given the fact that the Democrats have canceled theirs this week?
You know, the RNC is committed to updating the safety precautions and making sure that they have a safe and successful convention. I do think there will be a convention. It will be different than conventions historically, but I know that certainly the delegates in New York State and delegates across the country are excited to renominate the president, and they're going to take those precautions and make sure that whether it's adequate masks, whether it's hand sanitizer, whether it's temperature checks at the door. I know the RNC is putting a lot of planning into that.
Excellent. Terry?
Yes, I have one more hand up, and that's from Valerie Tate. Valerie, please ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I'm from New Jersey, and we just had a very hard fought primary battle to go against Congressman Andy Kim in our district of Ocean County in Burlington. And I'm really concerned because it was a very nasty primary. And I feel like now we have, I guess, a winner that's not, I guess it's not official, but it looks like it's official. And I'm really concerned about the damage that's done between us as Republicans, especially since our Republican woman candidate did lose. And I want to make sure that, even though people didn't get her in the forefront, that they'll get behind the guy that will be running against Congressman Kim, it looks like, Richter. So I'm concerned about, it was very nasty in primary battle with the literature. So do you have any advice for our party in Ocean County to, we've had some contested primaries even for the head of our Republican Ocean County committee. So it concerns me. I feel like we might lose our seat if we don't heal some of these or go about patching up some of the issues with grace and support.
Well, I think, my experience, I had one of the most competitive primaries in the country when I first ran, and it was tough. It was a huge amount spent against me, a lot of negativity. And what I focused on was rebuilding and ensuring that we came together, not just as Republicans, but all voters going into the general election. That's going to be really important. I am familiar with that race. I know that it was a resounding win by Richter. Yes. And again, I credit anybody who raises the hand to run for office, but I also believe in the will of the primary voters in nominating who's the strongest candidate. So I think it's on both candidates, the winner and the individual who did not win, to really come together and lead by example. Politics is tough. It is a challenge, and these primaries are important. I am fully supporting David Richter as he goes to the general election because we want to win back that seat. So again, building those relationships are important. I think you have to unmute again, Carol. Great.
This next question comes from Barbara Ellman. Are you concerned about the widespread use of mail-in ballots in New York?
Yes, I am. I am concerned about ballot integrity. I think that while I support absentee voting, I do not support the automatic mailed ballot. We have seen that there has been abuse and a lack of election integrity and election security. We've also seen some disturbing trends in California, for example, with the ballot harvesting, which is one of the reasons why we lost multiple races. I think we need to have a safe and secure elections. And again, expanded absentees where you have to apply for an absentee ballot. We have that in New York State. But I am concerned about the automatically mailed ballots. And I'm concerned because, making sure that we're not having an abuse and politicization of that process. It's going to hurt the integrity of our elections unless we have those safeguards, which are expanded absentee ballots.
Terry, do you have any other live questions to ask of the Congresswoman?
We do. We have a question from Carol Chukovich. Carol?
Hi, thank you. I didn't realize I needed to unmute myself. My question is regarding the RNC response to the Black Lives Matter's talking points, because our party is constantly being targeted as a racist party. And I think we need a proactive message to respond to people who make those accusations.
We stand strongly for every American, no matter race, creed, gender, color, religion, and withstand the test of time. Equal justice under the law, and we also have a very strong record to run on. We are the party, and this president who has delivered criminal justice reform through the First Step Act. We built that bipartisan coalition led by Tim Scott and Democrats and Republicans to get that across the finish line. In addition, we've seen in the economic resurgence that we are at a historically low unemployment number for African Americans. That is also a win under the Trump presidency. This administration also put forward executive actions to ensure policing reforms, to make sure that we update and ensure that we have increased training, to make sure that we have those strong relationships between our law enforcement and our communities. I also think that it's important that we stand strong for our amazing voices like Tim Scott and like Will Hurd, who are strong African-American elected Republicans who have been attacked by the Democrats in unacceptable terms. If you listen to the voicemails that Tim Scott has received from far left activists, they are heinous and they have no place in our district. So, we should be talking about our principles, and we also should be making sure that we are actively listening to our community members. What I've done at the local level is I've worked with many of our African-American leaders over my time in Congress. I also proactively reached out after the tragedy of George Floyd just to listen and to learn and to talk about what we can do to strengthen our community relations with our law enforcement. So thank you for that important question.
Well, Congresswoman Stefanik, as we end NFRW the issues, I'd like to know if you have any closing thoughts for us.
Well, thank you, Anne, for the great questions. Thank you for all of our hardworking Republican women members of the Federation across the country. A special shout out to all the New Yorkers who are on this call. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I know we're going to be working very hard up and down the ballot from sea to shining sea to make sure that our candidates are in a strong position as we go towards this November. And, again, I'm running hard in my district, so if you're able to support, I'd very much appreciate that. There's a huge target from Hollywood and the Democrats on me, so I greatly appreciate the opportunity to connect and answer all of your questions. And I wish everyone to have a wonderful rest of the week, and my wishes for safety and health for all of your family members during this challenging time.
And we wish the very same to you. Time has just flown by, and you've made the last 45 minutes feel like 45 seconds. I want to really thank you for sharing your precious time with us and for enlightening all of us on some of the most crucial issues today. You covered a myriad of topics and with such depth of understanding. Congresswoman, we truly look forward to having you join us again soon to give us updates on all these initiatives. I also want to ask you, if you would, to thank your staff for all of their assistance. What a pleasure working with them. Be well and be safe. And thank you again, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York's 21.
Thank you, Anne.
Friends, this has been another NFRW on the Issues. Thank you for joining us, and also for your hard work and your dedication during elections 2020. Thank you for your caring for this nation. Be sure to look for the next announcement of NFRW on the Issues. Till then, be well and be safe.